My beloved friends, let us begin by settling into a deep and quiet recognition. We are not gathered here to add anything to your life. We are not here to gather truths, to accumulate ideas, or to strive for spiritual improvement. We are here for one purpose alone: to behold what has been true from the beginning. Everything we speak today must arise from that stillness, not from desire, not from fear, not from the belief that we must acquire something we do not yet possess. For the moment we believe that something is missing, the moment we begin reaching outward, we step away from the spiritual foundation upon which all truth rests. For many years now, spiritual seekers have dedicated themselves to finding the secret of supply: material supply, emotional supply, spiritual supply. They have read countless books, practiced affirmations, visualized abundance, repeated mantras, monitored their thoughts, attempted to hold the correct vibration, and yet, for so many, supply remains uncertain. Fear continues to whisper its threats, and the heart continues to ask, why must abundance be so fragile? My friends, let us be honest. Where there is fear, there can be no recognition of God's presence. Where there is striving, there can be no awareness of our completeness. Where there is a belief in lack, even the most sincere spiritual effort becomes an extension of that same belief. And so we must pause here gently, humbly, and consider whether we have been approaching supply from an entirely mistaken standpoint. For centuries, humanity has believed that supply is something to get, something to attract, something to draw into our experience. Even our spiritual language reflects this assumption. I must manifest, I must create, I must call forth the abundance that I currently lack. But let me say to you, with the quiet authority of spiritual truth, this entire approach begins from a false premise. And when the premise is false, the conclusion cannot be true. If you begin with the belief that you lack, then whatever technique you use, whether material or spiritual, is only a more sophisticated way of confirming the same belief. You cannot, by any form of human effort, rise above the assumption that God has not yet given you what you need. No technique can reveal what only realization can uncover. You see, the infinite way teaches something startlingly simple: that the kingdom of God, the fullness of supply, the infinite abundance of spirit, is not something waiting to appear at some future time. It is not something that comes to you through force or attraction or vibration. It is not a reward for spiritual labor. It is not the result of correct thinking. It is not the product of mental manipulation. The kingdom of God is not will be, not might be, not becomes. It is. And if the kingdom of God is already complete, if spiritual creation is already finished, then you and I are not here to create supply. We are not here to chase supply. We are not here to attract supply. We are here to recognize the supply that has always been present in spiritual consciousness. My beloveds, you may not yet know this fully. You may not yet feel it. But I ask only that you listen with the inner ear. There is no lack in God. There is no void in spirit. There is no incompleteness in the divine presence which constitutes your very being. All that God is, you already are. All that God has is already flowing through your consciousness the moment you stop trying to get and begin to remember. So today, we will speak of this one fundamental misunderstanding that keeps so many in fear and limitation. We will explore how the desire to get supply blinds us to the presence of supply, how the longing for more becomes the barrier to seeing what already is, and how, through understanding and recognition, You may step out of the weary path of striving and into the quiet certainty of abundance as spiritual reality. We begin not by seeking new truths, but by uncovering the truth that has always been. Let us approach this journey slowly, gently, resting inwardly, with the understanding that nothing is being added to you, everything is being revealed. My friends, if we are to understand why lack appears in our lives, whether financial lack, emotional lack, or even spiritual lack, we must go deeper than the surface appearance. We must go beneath the story, beneath the condition, beneath the fear, to the very root from which all sense of limitation grows. And the root is always the same. It is as old as Adam, as pervasive as human thought, and as subtle as the quietest whisper in consciousness. The belief that I am a self apart from God. This is the only error, the only barrier, the only true source of every form of lack. For when you believe yourself to be a being separate from the infinite source of all good, you will naturally see yourself as incomplete. And from that incomplete sense of self arises fear, and from fear arises the very conditions you dread. Do you see? Lack is not the absence of something external. Lack is the mental and emotional result of one mistaken identity, the belief that I exist apart from the fullness of God. The human mind says, I must secure my good, I must earn my supply, I must find my opportunities, I must protect what I have, for there may not be enough. But the spiritual consciousness knows, I live and move and have my being in God. I am never outside the flow of infinite supply. I am never separate from the presence that is my life. Let us pause here in quiet recognition, not as theory, not as philosophy, but as the living truth of your being. If God is infinite, truly infinite, then nothing can be added to God and nothing can be taken from God. And if God is the very life, the very substance, the very essence of your being, then your supply, your wholeness, your abundance is not something you acquire. It is something you are. Lack appears only when we identify ourselves as separate. It appears when we mistake ourselves for a mortal self living in a world of fluctuating resources. It appears when we believe that our good must come from people, from circumstances, from opportunities, from conditions. But, beloveds, nothing in the visible world is the source of your supply. Nothing in the invisible world is withholding your supply. Both ideas belong to the same dualistic dream of separation. You are not a separate self trying to reach God. You are the expression of God already. You are the branch that grows from the vine. You are the light that shines from the flame. Your very existence is the evidence that God is expressing himself as you. The moment you accept separation, even unconsciously, fear becomes your companion. And the moment fear arises, your vision becomes clouded, and the fullness of God's abundance becomes invisible to your awareness. This is why Goldsmith said again and again, do not seek to change the outer picture. Seek to awaken from the belief in separation. For when separation dissolves, lack dissolves with it. When the false sense of self fades, the fears that belong to that self fade also. And when the belief in I am alone, I must provide, I must survive, dies within you, something remarkable begins to take place. You begin to feel carried. You begin to feel supported. You begin to sense a presence going before you, preparing the way, meeting your needs, opening doors, guiding your steps, not through effort, but through grace. This grace does not come from outside you. It comes from within, the place where you and God are not two but one. This is the foundation upon which all spiritual supply rests. Oneness, union, non-separation. So long as you see yourself as a being apart from God's infinite life, you will live with fear of not enough. But the moment you awaken to the truth that your being is the activity of divine life, lack becomes impossible. It may still appear, for a time appearances have momentum, but you will know that it has no law, no power, no substance. It is only the echo of an old belief, fading as a mist before the rising sun of recognition. Let us take one more moment in silence. Feel inwardly the truth that you are not separate from God. You are not seeking God's supply. You are the place where God's supply is forever pouring forth. This is the end of lack, not by effort, not by manifestation, not by attracting your good, but by awakening to who you are in God. My friends, as we continue this journey of awakening, let us gently examine a very popular path in modern spirituality, the path that teaches you to attract, to manifest, to draw into your life the good that you desire. This teaching is offered sincerely, and many receive comfort from it. But let us look at it through the lens of spiritual consciousness, through the wisdom of the infinite way, through the clarity that comes when the mind is still. The world today tells you that your thoughts create your reality, that your vibration pulls into your experience the forms you dwell upon, that if you can imagine it vividly enough, feel it strongly enough, hold it consistently enough, what you want will eventually come to you. And while this may bring temporary results, let us look more deeply beneath the positive words, beneath the hopeful practices, beneath the affirmations and visualizations lies one unspoken premise. I do not yet have. I must bring it to me. This is the hidden trap. For every technique built upon this foundation, whether it is called attraction, manifestation, creative visualization, or mental science, reinforces one central belief. The good I desire is separate from me. It exists outside of my present state of being. I must reach for it. I must draw it in. I must make it appear. And my friends, the moment you believe your good is outside of you, you have already accepted lack. You have already affirmed separation. You have already stepped out of the kingdom that is complete and entered the world of striving, the world where good must be earned, attracted, or created. There is no peace on the path of striving. Even when you obtain what you seek, you fear losing it. Even when you manifest one blessing, you begin striving for the next. Even when you create your dream, you become anxious to maintain it. The law of attraction offers the promise of control, but it cannot dissolve the fear that is born of separation. For as long as you believe you are the one doing the attracting, you will live with a quiet dread that your vibration may fall, your thoughts may slip, your efforts may weaken, and your supply may disappear. This is not freedom. This is not peace. This is not spiritual abundance. This is spiritual tension. And it is this tension, subtle, unrecognized, but ever present, that exhausts the seeker's soul. But hear this. Joel Goldsmith did not deny the sincerity of those who use such methods. He did not condemn them. He merely revealed what they could not see. That all such methods begin from the assumption that God has not yet given, that the universe is withholding, that life is incomplete, and because the premise is false, the piece is fragile. Goldsmith taught no methods of attraction. He offered no formulas of mental power. He refused to use the mind as a tool to manipulate the world. Why? Because mental manipulation, however noble its intention, affirms the very thing it seeks to escape, the belief that good must be produced rather than recognized. Let us look inwardly here, quietly, honestly. When you affirm wealth, is it not because you fear lack? When you visualize abundance, is it not because you believe it is not yet present? When you try to raise your vibration, is it not because you fear the consequences of staying as you are? All striving is fear dressed in spiritual language. You may speak of abundance, but inwardly you feel the threat of insufficiency. You may speak of love, but inwardly you fear rejection. You may speak of success, but inwardly you fear failure. And this inner contradiction cannot be healed by more affirmations, more visualizations, more techniques. The issue is not your thoughts. The issue is the starting point. If your starting point is I lack, every practice becomes an attempt to overcome the very belief you are silently holding. My beloveds, spiritual supply does not come by effort. Spiritual abundance does not flow through manipulation. The infinite Christ, the presence of God as your very life, is not summoned by vibration, nor attracted by thought. It is revealed through recognition. It is unveiled through stillness. It is felt when striving ceases and the soul rests in the truth. I and the source of all supply are one. No method based on effort can bring you to the awareness of what already is. No practice based on separation can reveal your unity. No technique based on fear can unveil the presence that dissolves fear. And so, gently, lovingly, with no condemnation, we release the burden of striving. We release the pressure to attract. We release the belief that we must maintain our vibration or lose our good. Let the world of mental effort fall away. Let the belief in control soften. Let the mind grow quiet, not because you command it, but because you recognize that God, not the mind, is the source of your life. When striving ends, grace begins. When effort stops, revelation begins. When the illusion of separation dissolves, abundance becomes obvious, not because you attracted it, but because it was never absent. My beloved friends, now that we have seen the hidden burden that striving places upon the soul, let us turn our attention to something infinitely more sacred, more peaceful, more liberating. Let us turn to the heart of the infinite way, the teaching that spiritual creation is already finished and the kingdom of God is already complete. This truth does not belong to any book or movement. It is the truth of being itself. And when the mind grows still enough to perceive even a glimmer of it, a great weight lifts from the heart. You see, in the consciousness of God, the one infinite, indivisible consciousness, nothing is unfinished, nothing is incomplete, nothing is withheld, nothing is lacking. What God is fully, what God expresses completely. There is no such thing as a partial creation, a developing creation, or a creation waiting to be manifested. Creation is finished. This is the meaning of spiritual abundance. Not that you someday will have what you need, but that in the invisible realm of truth, the realm where cause and effect are one, your good already exists. When Jesus uttered those profound words, "It is finished," it was not a declaration of an ending. It was the revelation of a spiritual reality, a reality in which the human sense of lack, limitation, and separation is dissolved in the light of divine completeness. It is this reality that Joel Goldsmith devoted his life to unveiling, and so he taught. All demonstration is the realization of that which already is. Your health is already whole in God. Your supply is already complete in God. Your guidance, your protection, your purpose, all of it, already fulfilled in the fullness of the Christ. The appearance of lack does not mean lack exists. The appearance of delay does not mean delay exists. The appearance of obstacles does not mean God is withholding anything. These appearances are shadows of the human mind. A mind that believes in time, that believes in process, that believes good must be earned or attracted. But in the consciousness of God, the only true consciousness, nothing needs to be attracted. Nothing needs to be earned. Nothing needs to be added. The kingdom is finished. Let us pause in that recognition. Let the idea fall not only upon the mind, but upon the heart. Let it rest within you gently, without effort, without analysis. Everything you believe you must achieve spiritually, financially, relationally, even physically, is already present in spiritual form, awaiting your recognition, not awaiting your efforts, not awaiting your worthiness, not awaiting your affirmation, not awaiting the right technique or the right energy, only awaiting your recognition. Goldsmith did not teach the universe as something to be manipulated. He did not teach God as a vending machine that dispenses good in response to correct mental activity. He taught God as the infinite fullness of being, expressing, unfolding, pouring forth as your very life. If supply appears absent, the absence is not in God. The absence is in our awareness. If opportunity appears blocked, the blockage is not in spirit. It is in the mind's interpretation. If good seems delayed, the delay is not in the divine. It is in our capacity to perceive what already is. So then, the spiritual path is not one of achievement. It is not a quest to increase good. It is not a struggle to make something happen. It is a path of awakening, a path of seeing, a path of recognizing the already finished kingdom and resting in its completeness. Let me say this clearly so there is no misunderstanding. You do not bring supply into your life. Supply is the activity of God flowing through your consciousness. It cannot be increased. It cannot be decreased. It can only be recognized or ignored when you rest in the presence, when you abide in the awareness of oneness, when you cease striving and begin listening. The provision that appears in your outer life is merely the outward expression of the inner recognition, not a miracle, not a reward, not a manifestation, a revelation of what was always so. Now, in this moment, allow this truth to enter your consciousness. My supply is not coming. My supply is, feel the shift, feel the release, feel the quiet joy of knowing that nothing real can be missing from the life that is lived in God. This is the beginning of freedom. This is the foundation of abundance. This is the gateway to the next stages of our journey. My beloved friends, now that we have laid the foundation of the already finished kingdom, let us move into the very heart of the matter. The single mistake that keeps humanity circling endlessly in the desert of lack, even while standing in the presence of infinite abundance. And that mistake is this: attempting to get what is already yours, attempting to attract what is already present, attempting to manifest what has never been missing, attempting to reach for a good that is already the substance of your being. Every form of lack that appears in your experience can be traced to this one misunderstanding, the belief that you must bring something into your life that is not yet here. Listen gently. Listen without self-judgment. Listen as one who is awakening from a long dream. The moment you try to get supply, you declare to yourself, I do not have. The moment you try to attract love, you declare, love is not here. The moment you try to manifest healing, you declare, wholeness is absent from me. And these declarations, though silent, though unspoken, though dressed in spiritual clothing, are the very chains that bind the soul. You cannot rise into abundance while silently affirming lack. You cannot realize wholeness while striving to get it. You cannot know the presence of God while believing you are separated and must earn or summon the divine. This is why Goldsmith said so often, you can never get your good. You can only recognize it. Recognition is the key. Recognition is the path. Recognition is the doorway through which the invisible kingdom becomes visible. But striving is the veil. You see, as long as you are reaching outward, your attention is fixed on the absence you imagine. As long as you are begging God for supply, you cannot feel the God presence that is your supply. As long as you are attempting to make something happen, the mind is unable to perceive what is already happening within. Human effort blinds spiritual vision. This is why the spiritual path feels so exhausting when misunderstood. It is not the path that is tiresome. It is the mistaken premise from which we attempt to walk it. You believe you must get, you believe you must change, you believe you must correct, improve, or attract, and yet the entire spiritual life is built upon the opposite truth. You already are. You already are the expression of divine life. You already are the form through which infinite supply flows. You already are the embodiment of spiritual wholeness. You already are the light of God made manifest. You are not a seeker. You are revelation. You are not a beggar. You are being. You are not an empty vessel waiting to be filled. You are the outpouring of God's abundance in individualized expression. Let us pause here together. Let this truth settle into your heart. I am not trying to get. I am trying to see. I am not trying to achieve. I am trying to awaken. The difference is everything. For when you try to get something, you are operating from the belief that you are incomplete. But when you seek to recognize, you are operating from the truth that the fullness is already present in the depths of your being. Striving creates fatigue. Recognition creates peace. Striving reinforces fear. Recognition dissolves fear. Striving changes nothing in consciousness. Recognition reveals everything that consciousness already contains. This is why Goldsmith never taught methods of acquisition. He taught the resting in God, the realization of truth, the awareness of presence. Because in that silence, in that surrender, in that recognition, the human sense of lack dissolves and the spiritual reality appears. My friends, you cannot get your good because God has never withheld anything from himself. And God is your life. You cannot attract your supply because your supply is the activity of God within your own consciousness. You cannot manifest abundance because abundance is the nature of God's creation, finished from the beginning. The only thing required is recognition, not effort, not demand, not manipulation, not technique, just the quiet recognition of what already is. And when the mind stops striving and the heart stops fearing, and the soul stands still long enough to behold the truth, you will discover that your good was never absent, your supply was never lacking, and God was never distant. The shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Now you are no longer a seeker of supply. You are the witness to supply. You are no longer a beggar at the gates of heaven. You are the place where heaven flows into visible form. You are no longer asking God for anything. You are resting in the awareness that God is expressing himself as everything you need. This is the turning point on the spiritual path. This is the moment when striving ends and realization begins. This is the beginning of abundance as spiritual consciousness rather than abundance as a human achievement. And from here, from this recognition, the way opens to a life of effortless fulfillment, gentle unfolding, and quiet peace. My beloved friends, now that we have understood the nature of the one great mistake, the attempt to get what is already ours, let us come gently into the sacred practice that dissolves this illusion, the practice of recognition. Recognition is not effort. Recognition is not mental work. Recognition is not the manipulation of thought or emotion. Recognition is an opening of the inner eye, a resting back into the truth that supply, wholeness, and abundance are already present in the invisible kingdom of God. Recognition is the turning of our attention from the outer appearance to the inner reality. It is the stillness in which we acknowledge that spirit is the only substance, the only cause, the only power, the only source. Let us enter this understanding slowly. The first step in recognition is silence, not the silence of forcing the mind to be still, but the silence that comes when you withdraw your faith from appearances, when you cease giving power to conditions, when you stop looking outside yourself for your provision, when you recognize that your good is not out there waiting to be attracted. Silence is the space in which the false sense of self, the self that fears, the self that strives, the self that worries, dissolves into the awareness of God's presence. Sit quietly, without words if possible. Sit without asking for anything, without naming any desire, without outlining any need. Simply sit in the presence of the one who has already fulfilled all. Allow this inner acknowledgement to arise gently. God is here. God is my life. God is my supply. In this presence, nothing is missing. Do not try to believe it. Do not try to feel it. Do not try to force conviction. Recognition is not emotional. It is simply the quiet knowing, this is truth. The second step in recognition is withdrawing dependence from the material world. Not abandoning it, not neglecting it, but ceasing to lean on it as your source. Your job is not your supply. Your bank account is not your supply. Your customers, clients, investments, or contacts are not your supply. These are forms, temporary, shifting, subject to change, but the substance behind all form, the invisible activity that appears as supply, is spirit. And spirit is always present, always flowing, always expressing, regardless of form. When you stop treating form as the source, you stop fearing its changes. And when fear dissolves, consciousness opens, and supply begins to flow more freely. The third step in recognition is feeling the presence, not emotionally, but spiritually. A quiet sense that something is here, something alive, something real, something whole. A presence that cannot be seen with the eyes, yet can be known with the heart. This presence is your supply. This presence is your abundance. This presence is the law of your good. This presence is the only power behind every visible blessing. And as you sit in recognition of this presence, something beautiful occurs. Your consciousness begins to shift from fear to trust, from striving to resting, from human effort to spiritual grace. You see, recognition does not bring supply. Recognition reveals supply. Recognition does not attract abundance. Recognition unveils abundance that has never been absent. Recognition does not create opportunities. Recognition makes you aware of the opportunities that divine intelligence is already guiding you toward. This is why Goldsmith said, "In treatment, we do not change the outer picture, we change our consciousness of the picture." Now let me speak plainly. Recognition does not mean passivity. It does not mean sitting in a chair while waiting for money to rain from the sky. It means that whatever actions you take, phone calls, conversations, work, decisions, arise from a consciousness of completeness, not desperation. When recognition has taken root, your actions become peaceful, wise, appropriate, and fruitful because they are motivated by God, not fear. You no longer scramble. You no longer chase. You no longer force. You no longer cling. You rest, and from rest you act. You listen, and from listening you respond. You trust, and from trust you are guided. Recognition is the ending of the human attempt and the beginning of the divine activity. This is why the practice may begin in silence, but continues throughout the day. Each time fear arises, you pause inwardly. In spirit, this is already complete. God's work is finished. I need only recognize. Each time confusion appears, you quietly affirm, the intelligence of God is present here. Each time lack threatens, you rest in. Supply is the activity of divine consciousness. It cannot fail. Do not seek results. Do not watch for signs. Simply practice recognition for the sake of truth itself, and let the outer world take care of itself, as it inevitably will. In time, you will discover that recognition has become natural, not an exercise, not a practice, but a way of being, a state in which you live continuously in the awareness that your life is the expression of an infinite, invisible source. And from this state, abundance flows without fear, without effort, without strain. My beloved friends, it may bring comfort to your heart to see how this principle of recognition unfolds in the lives of those who earnestly practice it, not as a method to change appearances, but as a way to awaken from the illusion that appearances possess power. Let me share with you a few gentle illustrations, not to inspire imitation, but to reveal how consciousness expresses its completeness when fear is surrendered. For remember, nothing in these stories happened to the individuals. Everything flowed through their consciousness the moment they turned inward and recognized the allness of God. Let us begin quietly with a simple example. Story 1, the financial pressure that dissolved in stillness. There was a woman who came burdened with financial pressures that seemed overwhelming. Bills piled high, time running short, fear tightening its grip upon her heart. She tried everything the world told her: affirmations, prosperity lists, visualization, gratitude journals. But the more she tried to force abundance into form, the more her anxiety grew. One evening, exhausted from mental effort, she sat down not to pray for money, not to ask for help, but simply because she had no strength left to try. And in that stillness, something gentle happened. She remembered a truth she had once heard: your supply is not coming. Your supply is. She closed her eyes and whispered inwardly, Father, if supply is your activity, I can rest. In your presence, nothing is lacking. That was all. No affirmation, no technique, no emotional outburst, only a quiet recognition. She did not know it then, but at that moment, fear lost its authority. The next morning, she awoke not to a miracle of money, but to a miracle of peace. She found herself able to think clearly, act calmly, and respond wisely. Within days, a burden she had been carrying for months dissolved naturally through avenues she had not considered, not because she forced supply into her life, but because she released fear, and in that release, the flow of wisdom, which is the true supply, became visible. This is how consciousness works. Fear blocks. Recognition frees. Story 2, the promotion that came without striving. Another friend lived under the constant pressure to succeed. He believed that advancement in his work required ambition, effort, competition, and endless self-promotion. And though he succeeded outwardly, inwardly he lived in fear of being overlooked, fear of not being enough, fear of missing his opportunity. One day he read a simple line from the Infinite Way. Your supply is the activity of divine consciousness. It flows where you are, as you are, when you recognize its presence. It touched something deep within him. That evening he sat in silence, and for the first time in his life, he released the idea that his career depended on human effort. He said inwardly, Father, if it is thy activity expressing as my life, then my place, my supply, my progress cannot be withheld or missed. He felt no sudden emotion, no revelation, no vision, but a great burden lifted the burden of self-seeking, self-protecting, self-promoting. Over the next weeks, he found himself working without pressure, speaking without fear, listening without agenda. He was simply present and without striving, without campaigning, without even thinking about it. A promotion arrived, one he did not seek, one he did not request, one that seemed to come effortlessly. Why? Not because he manifested it, not because he attracted it, but because his consciousness shifted from I must secure my place to God is the law of my place. In that recognition, fear dissolved, and the form that matched the new consciousness naturally appeared. Story 3, the business renewal that followed surrender. There was a man whose small business had begun to fail. He tried every strategy, marketing, planning, networking, all admirable human efforts, yet the fear beneath them grew stronger each day. One morning, overwhelmed, he put his head in his hands and said, I no longer know what to do. In that moment of surrender, something quiet spoke to him. You are trying to keep this business alive through human will. Release it, let God be the source, or let it go. He closed his eyes. For the first time, he shifted from seeking to recognizing. He said, if the life of this business is God's activity, then nothing can destroy it. If it is not God's activity, nothing can save it. Either way, I release the burden. Then he rested, truly rested. Within days, clarity came, not emotional clarity, not mental clarity, spiritual clarity. He saw which aspects of the business were driven by fear, which by ego, and which by sincerity. He let go of what needed to fall away. He strengthened what was rooted in integrity. He acted without panic. Over the next months, the business transformed, not because he pushed it, but because he stepped aside and allowed the invisible presence to guide its unfolding. This is the secret of spiritual supply. When fear is surrendered, the divine rhythm takes over. The thread that connects all these stories. My friends, do you see the pattern? No one in these stories manifested anything. No one forced an outcome. No one attracted supply. No one begged God for relief. They each practiced one thing: recognition. Recognition of what already is. Recognition of the finished nature of spiritual creation. Recognition of the presence of God as the source of their life. And recognition always produces the same harvest: clarity, peace, wisdom, right action, effortless unfolding. This is not mystical fortune. This is not spiritual luck. This is the law of consciousness, as Goldsmith taught. When you know the truth does the work, not you, not your effort, not your mind. Truth itself. My beloved friends, having witnessed what unfolds when recognition becomes real in consciousness, let us now enter a deeper understanding, the art, the grace, the quiet majesty of living from completeness, not merely visiting it. For there is a difference between touching the presence and abiding in the presence. There is a difference between having moments of realization and living from realization. There is a difference between glimpsing wholeness and dwelling in it as your natural state. Living in the consciousness of completeness is not a technique, not a discipline, not something we strain to maintain. It is a way of being that emerges naturally when the truth becomes more real to you than the appearance. And what is the truth? That God is the fullness of your life, and where God is, nothing can be incomplete. That spirit is the substance of all form, and where spirit is, nothing can be lacking. That the Christ is your identity, and where Christ is, nothing can be broken. To live in completeness is to live without fear of loss. To live in completeness is to meet each day without the tension of striving. To live in completeness is to move through life without needing anything outside yourself to feel secure. This is not human confidence. This is not mental positivity. This is not emotional optimism. This is spiritual knowing. Let us explore what this looks like in daily life. 1. Living without need. To live in completeness is to dissolve the word need from consciousness. You may have tasks, obligations, responsibilities, yes, but inwardly, you no longer cling to the belief that you need anything from anyone or anything. For the presence within you is the source, the law, the substance, and the activity of your life. When you live from this awareness, something extraordinary happens. You stop using people, conditions, or circumstances as your source, and in removing that pressure, you free them and yourself. Love flows without demand. Work flows without fear. Supply flows without effort. 2. Meeting problems as shadows, not realities. Living in completeness does not make you immune to appearances. Bills may still arrive. Challenges may still arise. Illness may still attempt to present itself. Relationships may still encounter strain. But the difference is this. You no longer meet these appearances as real powers. You meet them as shadows of the human mind, dissolving in the light of recognition. When a challenge appears, you inwardly say, "This is not a condition requiring correction. This is a shadow requiring recognition of the light," and instantly the burden lifts. You do not fight the shadow. You do not resist it. You do not try to transform it. You turn gently toward the presence and say within yourself, "Father, you are here." And in that moment, the appearance begins to shift, not because you change the outer picture, but because you refuse to grant it substance. Completeness recognizes nothing outside of God's presence. 3. Acting from peace, not pressure. A person living in completeness acts decisively, wisely, and lovingly, but never from panic, never from desperation, never from the sense that something terrible will happen if they make the wrong move. Actions arise from peace, not pressure. This is the divine rhythm. When you are aligned with completeness, your life no longer feels like a series of urgencies. It feels like a flow, natural, graceful, unobstructed. Even when multiple responsibilities call for attention, you sense an inner order, as though the universe itself is orchestrating the steps. And completeness is never chaotic. Completeness is never rushed. Completeness is the rhythm of God appearing as your day. 4. The end of comparison and competition. To live in completeness is to live free from the torment of comparison. You no longer measure your worth by what others have, achieve, or display. For you know that your good is not in a person, a job, a bank account, or a social structure. Your good is in God, individualized as your life, competition dissolves. Jealousy evaporates. Envy becomes impossible. You rejoice in the blessings of others because you recognize the source is infinite and what expresses through one cannot diminish what expresses through all. 5. The quiet confidence of oneness. When you live in completeness, there is a quiet confidence that accompanies you. Not pride, not boldness, not spiritual superiority, but an inner steadiness. You walk through life with a sense that something is with you, something goes before you, something is within you, something surrounds you. Not as belief, not as hope, not as affirmation, but as inner proof that you and the Father are one. That oneness is your completeness. And because oneness is never broken, completeness is never threatened. 6. The natural gratitude that requires no words. Living in completeness brings a gratitude so deep it cannot be spoken. It does not depend on outcomes. It does not rise and fall with circumstances. It is not gratitude for something. It is gratitude as a state of being, a gratitude that arises simply because God is, and because in God's presence you are whole. This gratitude is silent, but it radiates through your words, your actions, your presence, your breath. It becomes part of the atmosphere around you, and others feel it, not as emotion, but as peace. 7. The realization that life is already unfolding perfectly. Living in completeness reveals that nothing in your life is random, chaotic, or accidental. Everything is part of a divine unfolding, even the things the human mind labels undesirable. You begin to see the hidden order in all things. You learn to trust the rhythm of your life. You stop resisting what comes and fearing what goes. You see that every chapter of your journey is perfectly timed, perfectly designed, perfectly guided, not because God intervenes to arrange your life, but because God's presence is your life. In completeness, nothing is out of place. Nothing is without meaning. Nothing is without purpose. 8. The great shift from human life to spiritual unfoldment. To live in completeness is to shift the center of your identity. You no longer see yourself as a human being seeking spiritual experiences. You see yourself as spirit expressing through human experience. Your life becomes an unfolding, not a struggle. A revelation, not a pursuit. A flowering, not an achievement. The burden of becoming drops away. You begin to live the truth. I am already all that God is expressing. My life is the outpouring of infinite completeness. I need only recognize what already is. My beloved friends, this is the life you are being called into. Not a life of getting, not a life of manifesting, but a life of being. A life in which completeness is not something you reach for, but something you live from. This is the consciousness that dissolves lack. This is the consciousness that ends fear. This is the consciousness that reveals heaven not as a place, but as a state of awareness. My beloved friends, as we come gently to the close of this journey together, let us pause, let us breathe, let us rest in the awareness that everything we have spoken is not a promise of what may someday be, but a revelation of what already is. You stand now at a turning point, not a turning from one path to another, not a turning from lack to abundance, not a turning from fear to confidence, but a turning from illusion to truth, from effort to grace, from striving to recognition. Everything you have sought, every blessing, every healing, every provision, every peace has been here, complete, finished, present, waiting only for your recognition. And now, you You know that God is not a distant power who must be persuaded. You know that supply is not a prize that must be earned. You know that abundance is not created by thought or vibration or technique. You know that your good cannot be added to and it cannot be taken away. You know the truth that sets the soul free. My life is already complete because God is the substance of my being. So now, as you walk forward, do not return to striving. Do not return to fear. Do not return to the belief that something is missing or that you must go out into the world to secure your good. Let the old way fall away like a dream upon waking. You are not seeking anything anymore. You are recognizing what already is. When you rise in the morning, pause not to ask for a blessing, but to acknowledge the presence of the One who is the source and the fullness of all blessing. When you meet the day's responsibilities, do so with a quiet knowing. This is God's activity unfolding as my life. When challenges appear, do not fight, do not fear. Turn inward gently and say, Father, you are here. This is already complete in you. And then rest. Rest in the assurance that there is no power opposed to God, no condition outside of God, no lack within God, and therefore none within you. Walk through life with the simplicity of a child who knows he is cared for. Walk with the ease of one who knows that every step is guided. Walk with the peace of one who knows that every need is met before it arises. Walk with the joy of one who lives not in the world of appearances, but in the world of spiritual truth. And as you do, something beautiful will happen. Not suddenly, not dramatically, not as a miracle to astonish you, but gently, quietly, naturally. Your outer life will begin to reflect your inner knowing, not because you pushed, not because you manifested, not because you attracted, but because consciousness always externalizes according to its own nature. When the inner is complete, the outer becomes harmonious. When the inner is still, the outer becomes orderly. When the inner rests in God, the outer reveals the presence of God. This is the life that awaits you, not a life free from experience, but a life free from fear. Not a life without decisions, but a life without anxiety. Not a life in which you escape the world, but a life in which you walk through the world carrying the atmosphere of heaven. Let this be your remembrance. You are not a seeker. You are not striving. You are not becoming. You are the expression of the already finished work of God. Carry this truth with you. Let it be the foundation of your days. The silence beneath your thoughts, the peace within your heart. And each time you forget, as all of us do, simply return to recognition, return to simplicity, return to the awareness of God's presence. For the moment you return, you discover that you never left. You were always in the completeness of God, and the completeness of God was always in you. Go now, not as seekers, but as revealers, revealers of the Christ within, revealers of the abundance that flows from spirit, revealers of the peace that comes from knowing it is finished. My beloved friends, walk gently, walk silently, walk joyfully, for you walk in the already finished life.